One thing I found in my life over and over again is God's plans for my life and the actions therein to get to what I believe He's telling me to do doesn't make sense in a lot of cases. I'm a software developer, and how I got my current job was I left my old job with no job lined up, totally a leap of faith because some things were happening behind the scenes at the company, and things that happened in the corporate world, and I just knew it was time to go. I felt God nudging me, and I just jumped off. And it was one of the most trying times in my life, especially faith-wise. And God stripped a bunch of things from me in that season, including the relationship I was in with a woman, preconceived notions that I had of the world and my place in it, and my calling just therein. And none of it made sense. If I would have proposed that idea to anybody, any of my friends, they would have been like, you should find a job before you jump first. And the result of me jumping off, that got me, good morning, Zephyr. That got me to the job that I have today, which is essentially my dream job, honestly. Like, I want to be an architect someday, right? But right now, I'm like, I'm in a unique place where my knowledge of current programming languages and my knowledge of COBOL and like the mainframe, which is older than I am, I can link the two and I can implement new technologies in a way that no one else really can in my company. And it's like a divine appointment from God, right? And I would have never been put in this position if I would have never jumped initially. And so I'm going to be reading Genesis 18 in the story of Abraham. I read it the last time, which was Wednesday, but I want to read it again because, for one, I think I can do it better, which I guess there's a lesson in that. If you do something one time, it's okay to do things again and admit that you didn't do so good the first time. Killing pride is, I think, essential to evolving in one's evolution of their personality. Because in this story, there's a depiction of doubts arising from people in regards to what God is saying to them. And we really won't be able to type for a bit, but I'm here listening. Hey, thanks, Zephyr. So I wanted to come back to this because having doubts in what God says to you, I believe, is normal. And where the faith comes in and courage comes in is just being able to face those fears and doubts and to act out in spite of them, right? Like when you have a phobia of something, it's not so much that you lessen the fear, it's just that your courage increases, right? Like that's how it is in the psychological world. That's how that works. That's what behavioral psychologists do, is they expose people to their phobias in minute ways and then increase that over time, the exposure, and then they become comfortable with it, with the thing that they're afraid of. And so in the same manner, your faith grows from the instantiation of it. If you jump off in a leap of faith, like I guess I can speak on when I jumped off going to status of being employed to unemployed with nothing lined up, my faith has grown exponentially since then. And I'm currently in a season now where I have to have a lot of faith to do X, Y, and Z things to bring about, A, B, C things to fruition, right? Good morning, Sharice. So yesterday, where have I been? My job as a software developer, I'm in charge of servers that house all these credit card printers in the nation, among all the Shields sporting goods store that are in the nation. And we've had a lot of stuff going on with them. And I'm like one of well, I am one of the only people that have knowledge of it, for one. I have some knowledge that no one has. And so when you are responsible for things of that nature, there's a responsibility that comes with it, wherein if there's a problem, you're going to have to fix it because, well, you can take that and extrapolate it and apply it to what I was just talking about before. That is, God will set you up to be the answer to a problem, right? That only you can fix. And it's not going to make sense to anybody else. So that's where I've been, Therese, is working and handling stuff. And yeah, Wednesday was hell. Like for me mentally, I don't know what that was about. Well, I do know what that was about now. I feel a ton better. Yesterday was so weird. And yeah, I'll speak to that after this. But I want to start by reading Genesis 18 here. It's right after the Lord appeared to Abraham and presented the covenant, and then covenant to him and pretty much presented the promise to him that he was going to be the father of a great nation and that he's going to bear a son, and through his seed the world will be blessed, and he's going to bring about his people and whatnot. And so I'll start with chapter 18, verse 1. And I have the original translation here, the Hebrew translation in front of me. And the title of this chapter in that version is Celestial Visitors. In mine, it says the three visitors. So I like the celestial visitors more because you'll see as the story's depicted, it's a little odd because it says the Lord appeared to Abraham and then he sees three visitors. And I'm like, it wasn't really resonating with me the first time I read it. But I think the Lord appeared to Abraham and then the three visitors are angels of some sort. That's what I believe. So I'll start with verse 1. It says, the Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw three men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance to his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. I'll just read the entire chapter and then I'll come back with my thoughts. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant. Very well, they said. Do as you say. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. Quick, he said, get 3 seahs of fine flour and knead it and bake some bread. Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice, tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. Where is your wife Sarah? They asked. There in the tent, he said. Then the Lord said, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already old and well advanced in years, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I am old? Is there anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. And that's where I'll stop today. And if you guys have any thoughts, of course, add them. They were angels. I didn't pick that up the first time. I was like, that's so odd. Because so he's near these great trees of Mamre. He looks up, sees 3 men standing nearby. They were angels, celestial beings. And then obviously, because if they're just like 3 normal dudes, Abraham, this guy like owns, he has a lot of resources right now. God has blessed him in his life. He went to war or battle against multiple kings and won. So he has like this mini nation basically, right? Allotted to him. He's in charge of a bunch of people. He has land. He has a lot of power, right? So you wouldn't think that he would just see three guys and run up to them and just bow low to the ground. And so he's speaking to them. He says, if I found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. And then he orders his wife to bring about sacrifices, a calf, which is, again, this shows Abraham. Earlier in the story, it showed Abraham stopping what he was doing to go to this altar that he built and take time to sacrifice and worship the Lord, which logically doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to sacrifice your time if you're trying to bring about something to fruition, try to accomplish a goal. It doesn't make sense to stop and then worship, right? Or stop and give thanks to God. But Abraham makes it a point to do that because it is important in regards to the promises that God brings to you and how you acting out your belief that God is outside of logic and reason. He operates outside of those parameters. And what others do and how they have achieved successful stature and successful things in life is not the exact way that you have to do it. God calls people to specific things that have aspects of, different characteristics of specificity to them. And there's certain details that he wants them to carry out for that specific goal or calling. And it's because they have to build the characteristics and the skills and the traits in order for them to be the person that's going to carry out that specific goal, right? And so what Abraham does is going to be completely different than what someone else does in the Bible, right? And that's really important to understand, because if you just compare what God is calling you to do or what you think he's saying and compare that to some person you're looking up to or some leader or someone else, you can sabotage a lot of things by getting into a performance-based behavior by analyzing others and what worked for others and applying it in your life without filtering it through God. You can sabotage God's entire plan for you. I believe that. I know that. And your mentors, when you ask them questions, you also have to understand, and this is an act of faith, that they don't hear what you hear from God. They're not going to. They're not going to hear it. They don't hear it. They're not going to feel the same feelings that you have about your calling that God has placed in you. They're not going to feel that. And so when you get advice from them, you have to take that into consideration, which I believe it speaks to having a correct hierarchical belief system where God is at the top no matter what. And whoever you're learning from, no matter how much money they have, success they have, will work for them, may not work for you. And they will do their best to give you advice, which is within the parameters of their intelligence and understanding and wisdom of the world. But when God calls someone to do something that's never been done before, for instance, who's going to be the template for that, right? And so as long as you have God at the top and you don't fall into like subconsciously idolizing other humans, I believe you're on a far greater path and you are more apt to receive divine revelation during your adventure, during the journey that you're on, just like Abraham is in this story. Sharice, he said, do you follow Bible Project? Let Let me see. They have a great video series on celestial beings. So the Bible Project, I'm pretty sure that's done by someone that works with Life Church, the church that I serve at. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I had a moment this morning where I was comparing myself to another organization, and I was getting ready to throw in the towel. I was so angry that another organization was getting all this publicity, but I also knew that the leader lied and has unethical practices, that she was getting all this recognition. So, right, that's a similar scenario where, and it's complicated too, because sometimes if you keep seeing something over and over and over and over, like a lot, I do believe that usually that means God is trying to tell you something. And even just the way the mind works is if you have a certain, if in your relationships, you have a certain behavior that is exhibited to you by people, your friends, and it keeps repeating over and over. Like, let's say if I go and look at my past and there's a commonality between every single girlfriend I've ever had, that is identifying something. And if they all have the same complaint, or in some things, certain complaints, they'll have different verbiage because it's coming from different mindsets, but the root problem will still be the same. And sometimes you really have to work and dig at it. But if you get similar thoughts that happen over and over and over, there's some validity to that. And I think you should absolutely dig into it. And there's truth to it. I bet there's truth to it. There is. And that's complicated too, because just like Abraham, it's like, and other characters in the Bible, you'll have Noah, for instance, where there was a drought and he was creating an ark. So I'm sure he faced a lot of doubts, right? And he probably heard a lot of the same thing from a lot of people. And I don't know. There's a faith aspect to it as well, like giving up something in order, well, it is a sacrifice. That is the act of Abraham here stopping to give a sacrifice to God. Like when God calls you to leave something, you are literally sacrificing it, especially if it's actually doing something really very good in your life to you personally and emotionally and psychologically and maybe even spiritually. But God wants you to sacrifice that thing that is providing something that's good for something divine. And I don't know any time that I've really had a huge like leap or a huge like a monumental advance in my adventure, my life, wherein I didn't have to leave something that I really loved. I don't remember any time. And he responded, "Nobody can do it like you. She's not you." I was like, "God, should I not be doing this?" Okay. The thought of me wanting to quit is I feel like I'm not qualified or I don't have what it takes. So, I get really wary about telling people to quit specifically because that's truly something that's between you and God. And sometimes he's telling you to buckle down and to endure because just like I've been sharing a lot recently, that Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, Jesus learned obedience through suffering. That's not the exact verbiage of it. I'll pull it up right now because I don't want to give someone the wrong idea here. So it is Hebrews. I don't like telling people what exactly to do in their scenario. I think that's wrong. I think it's wrong. You should present ideas to people for them to to entangle themselves in and to work through themselves. That's what psychologists do. They don't tell people what to do. It's like they lead them to answers, because if you just out and out tell someone what to do, usually the initial reaction is to reject it, right? And I think the only being that you should obey like that is God. And even in the Bible, it shows like characters having to ask God for signs multiple times. Even if like the first couple signs of like, hey, if this is the way you want me to do it, give me a sign. Even if the first like 3 were super obvious, they'll still ask. So God's aware of doubts. And Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, it says, I'll just start in verse 7. This is Hebrews chapter 5. It says, during the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverent submission. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. It's like, that punches me in the face every time I hear it, because God was the perfect being. And we don't know how that mechanic actually works, like how that worked. I don't even know if I really want to open this can of worms, but I don't know how he learned anything, because he was God in the flesh. Now, I'd probably have to dig and find what the original language was of that text. No kitty. And dig into make sure that is the exact word that was used. But that's interesting. And regardless, it's like what the Bible says. If you're going to use it for your life, you either take it as it's written and then do research on it and dig in the pursuit of truth, or it's all discarded. And so, having said that, it is what it is. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And then verse 9 says, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him, and was designated by God to be high priest in the order of Melchizedek. So there is suffering to people's adventures and callings. And I think sometimes, and I've done this myself, is you can get stuck in this this endless self-perpetuating loop of being at one degree of suffering and just stay there and never experience God's blessings or getting out of that, because you are too afraid to experience the greater degree of suffering that it's going to take for you to either get to the next level or to leave the current level, which sometimes to get to the next level, you do have to leave. Yeah, I take that back. You do have to leave the current degree of suffering. But it's just like I've been saying, is people are okay with suffering with the way that they currently are, because they're used to it. They know what it feels like they do. And so you can get comfortable with it, but you have to leave that level, right? You do, in order to get to something greater or different. And when it comes to leaving things, it's like, hey, have a good day, Vaporama. Thank you for stopping in. When it comes to leaving stuff, I always when I left my job for nothing lined up, I told God that if I'm wrong, man, change things and make things so it'll be greater than my current scenario. Like, even if I'm wrong, cover me, please. And he will. He will. Like, I mean, that's a true assessment of your faith, right? Like, does your belief in God count for you making mistakes? Account for you making mistakes? And so that's complicated, right? And it is so hard to leave things. It's hard to leave fears. Like, I'm dealing with that now. It's hard to leave your current level of fear. There's an addictive trait to it, a little bit. it doesn't even feel good. But you can really start to think that you're just start spiraling down into worthlessness. And it gets really hard to leave. And I think the longer that you stay in it, the harder it becomes to leave. Does that make sense? All right. Have a good day, Sharice. I hope that made sense. Because that's, if I'm not, I know when I'm suffering, if I'm not growing, I know if I'm honest with myself and I keep getting the same question in my head over and over from God, that I believe it's from God, it's because I need to do something different than what I'm doing now. And it's usually how it always is. You just have to keep asking him what to do. And sometimes you have to endure the suffering in order to get to the greater. I don't know. It's really hard. But something has to change, is what I'm saying. All right. So after he stops at the altar to sacrifice for these three angels, celestial beings, they asked, "Where is Sarah?" He said, "They're in the tent." And then the Lord said, "Surely I will return to you about this time next year. Sarah, your wife, will have a son." And Sarah, who was listening, had doubts and was listening on the outside, I believe, at the entrance of the tent, yep, which was behind him. And she has this logic where she knows she's past childbearing age. So she laughs. And God hears that. And he addresses it. And she lies to God. And he addresses that too. But one thing I notice is that even though she lies to God and he addresses it, which means it's important, he still follows through on the promise to Abraham and follows through on using Sarah to bring that about by having a child through her. And the Lord's problem with her laughing is that she is taking logic and reason, her current understanding, and applying it to God. Because he asks, the Lord said to Abram, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord?'" And then he tells him, "I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah tried covering her tracks and said, "I did not laugh." And God's like, "Yes, you did." So she tried applying current understanding to God in a manner that I think is an earthly understanding, is how I would describe it. Because again, I think the creation of crazy faith, they say, or I don't like the word crazy faith. I don't think. I like illogical faith or a faith that has a divine aspect to it or root to it. Because faith, I think, gets confused for motivation a lot. The creation, how you create it, I believe the genesis of that sort of faith is by scrapping your understanding and logic in a manner that opens up an avenue in your mind and being for a miracle to happen. It like opens up the gates, right? You're letting God in. And people probably would hear that and be like, yeah, but he's God. He doesn't need you to let him in. Well, that's true. But also, I would say to that is he didn't need to create us, but he did to have a relationship with us. He didn't need to give us free will, but he did because he wanted to give us the choice of either having a relationship with him or not. So therefore, we do have to open up to him. And I believe faith works in that same sort of manner. You know, I've been listening a lot and reading a lot about psychology, and there's this guy, Piaget, who he was a genius and he did a lot of observation on children. And rather than speaking to a client, he would watch people and see the behaviors and kind of formalize hypotheses and understandings from that, right? And he always looked at life as, or how our morals are constructed through a game. Like we're always constantly playing games and there's rules to the games, right? And how we know whether something is a good thing to do or bad thing to do is by playing games in life. Like in the rules to certain games in life, such as if you went to play an actual video game or like a board game like chess, there's certain rules you play to that in order to acquire the desired outcome you have with that game with another person. There's different rules there than saying going and rolling jujitsu with somebody, right? Or enacting martial arts. There's different rules to this game. And the feedback you receive in a relational context is if you played the game correctly, others will want you to play it again. That's how you know, and that's how you learn that you're operating in a manner that is positive, and it starts building a life, right? And your morals, and it starts building your understanding of the world. And it lets you know, it's like this gauge of if I'm doing something that is good or bad, is this worthwhile or not, right? And I think a lot of that can be applied to your faith as well. Because rules when it comes to faith is complicated because it's almost like you have to the rule is you discard all the rules of the earth. Like if you read the Bible and you believe that God created us out of nothing, if you actually believe that, then you should be able to believe whatever, right? And there's really no negative to that, I feel. Now, God also gives us wisdom, and there's characters like Solomon and whatnot, which show the value of wisdom and interacting with the world and the things that you are positioned to be responsible for in a manner that is fruitful, right? And just good. And it's like this pursuit of truth as well. And what I mean by that is the proper way to handle and steward these things that you're responsible for. And so God values wisdom as well. So you have to disregard rules enough where God can do anything, but you have to play the game out of a place of wisdom where you will interact with the world and other people in a manner that people will want to interact with you and play with you, and you will get success therein, while at the same time you're still open enough spiritually and psychologically and emotionally to allow God to perform miracles and divine revelation in your life. Does that make sense? I know that's really complicated, but it's like there's a rule, there's a set of rules here on earth, and then it's a subset of this bigger system, which is God, that we don't really understand, but he's given us a textbook to go off of. And therefore, if you're in the pursuit of truth, which is how well, the whole reason this channel was made, for instance, and this whole endeavor, this adventure, whatever it is I'm doing, is to better equip ourselves to better interface with the world, which is the pursuit of truth. And that truth is how to, you know, better interface with the world. And so you should understand the rules of the world and understand those rules are a subset of the greater set of rules outside of it. And it's just like that hierarchical system that you have to have in your head about God being at the very top. Everything else is under him, right? Everything else is under him. Everything is. If anyone's there, let me know if that makes sense or if that's probably, it makes sense to me, but it's very complicated and it's very hard to act out. And to act that out takes courage, because the rules that you understand as you walk out life is your current understanding has to die all the time. Your current knowledge base, that's what learning is. Your current understanding dies, and then a new understanding is brought to life. And so there's like a small resurrection, like from death to life, similar to the manner, Jesus died for all of our sins and was resurrected again to bring about revelation for us to defeat death and sin. And we kind of go through that same sort of process every day by learning in the world and humbling ourselves, wherein we know we don't know everything, and learning is an advantageous aspect of life and something that should be strived to achieve, is that act of learning. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And so no matter what you're going through, just be aware that there are things that God calls you in life. I almost want to say always. When God calls you to something, it's going to make you feel uncomfortable. When you have a calling from the highest order, it's going to be uncomfortable. Just think about the relation that he has to you. When he's pulling you up, he's pulling you out of something. And it's always uncomfortable leaving things. I'm in a season right now in my life where I'm going to be leaving things that I've been in for a while. And it's very uncomfortable and scary for me relationally and spiritually and emotionally. It just is. And psychologically it is. But I know that I need to leave in order to get to a greater understanding of things. Right? And so don't let fear keep you where you are. The enemy is a liar. And if you want to live a miserable life, you will stay where you are. And if you're ever looking for excuses as to why not to do something, you will always find them, because this world, it's very harsh and cruel. If you're looking for something to give you a reason not to do something, you will always find it. Just flip that on its head and be like, I know what this feels like now. And if you can just gain the perspective of it being an adventure, which your life is, and just put your fate in God's hands, I believe he will honor that. Just ask him. Whenever I go to do something that's really wild, I'm like, God, please show me something. And he has always shown me something. Usually not on the timetable that I want or request. Sometimes I've had some things happen miraculously right in front of my face, which is a crazy story of the event that I'm talking about, the happenstance that I'm thinking of now. But faith it's a hard thing to attain. And it's not going to make sense to a lot of people, things that you're called to. And that's okay. And it's okay to make mistakes. You see God here, seeing the Sarah lied. He still followed through everything he said he was going to do. It's not irredeemable. And I know that no matter where you are in life, God can get you to the next level if you submit to Him, relinquish your pride, and have faith that God will bring about miracles in your life and can. And that's where I'm going to end today. And I love you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. I will not be on tomorrow. I think I will be here Sunday. I am considering going live only on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I'm not sure. And of course, being a software developer and being responsible for as many things that I am responsible for, there's sometimes I just can't be on even when I'm scheduled to be on. And so I thank you people that have been coming in every day. I'm very grateful for your time. And I'm grateful for the things that you say to me in the chat. It gets my brain going. And I'm hoping to learn from you as much as anything that I say stirs up anything in you. My goal isn't really to teach you stuff. It's to organically manifest a knowledge base together based on our differences in perspectives and opinions to better interface with the world through the Holy Spirit and divine revelations of God. And it's a good time. I love doing these, honestly. And I love you. I thank you. And I will see you Sunday, hopefully. You have a great rest of your day. Reach out to me in any of the avenues of communication that I have in the description, my social media contacts. I love you, Zephyr. And yeah, I don't think I'm forgetting anything. What God calls you to do doesn't have to make sense. And don't rely on other humans and idolize them to replace God. He can do crazy things in your life, and He loves you. Have a good day. 100%. Peace.